when they do the pre-interview with Stephen Meade, they're especially interested in the Ashraf story, the story of the sister of the Shah. And not only are they interested in that, but Stephen Meade is good in capitals with an exclamation point. So let's just run this next clip, which I will narrate.
Every good film is a documentary, and becomes more so with time. This is a great quote from French director Eric Romer, which certainly applies in the case of Coup 53. In fact, you might almost call its life after it was finished another whole film called Coup 53.1. Prior to that, Taghi and I worked together for 4 years, writing, shooting, and editing 532 hours of interviews, archive material, and animation. 14 minutes of that archive came from this program, End of Empire, Iran, which was broadcast in 1985. In researching that program, End of Empire interviewed this gentleman, Norman Darbyshire, who was head of the Iran station for MI6 in 1952 and 53. He's played in our film, as you've seen, by Ralph Fiennes. His interview was recorded on 4 tapes in late 1982, but nothing of it ever appeared in the finished film. What we didn't know at the time of shooting Ralph is that he actually looked very similar to Norman Darbyshire. Here's 2 photographs of them, both at age 29. Coup 53 premiered at Telluride in August of 2019, and then it went on to the London Film Festival, where it had 3 sold-out screenings, and played at all of the festivals that you see here over a 6-month period, which ended in March of 2020 because of the COVID epidemic. Despite the great reviews at the festivals, no distributors came forward to pick up our film. So on August 19th, 2020, we self-distributed Coup 53 through 118 theaters in the UK, USA, Ireland, and Canada. And it was universally acclaimed, 44 100% positive reviews from the mainstream press, giving us a certified fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes, one of only 108 films in all of cinema history to have this distinction. 2 days later, August 21st, the producers of End of Empire, Brian Lapping and Norma Percy, threatened to sue us for defamation. Their claim was that Coup 53 implies that Darbyshire was filmed on the record and that the producers of End of Empire complied with the UK government's demand that he be removed. They say they never shot him and that they would never agree to a demand like that from the government. However, they never raised any objection against Coup 53 in the whole year after its debut at the Telluride Film Festival, including those 3 sold-out shows at the London Film Festival. To enforce their opinion, they sent us 12 pages of cuts and additions that they wanted us to make in Coup 53. And if we didn't agree to those changes, they would prosecute us for defamation. And also alert the motion picture academies in the US and the UK about their grievances toward us. In essence, what they wanted us to do was to remove all of cameraman Humphrey Trevelyan's 3 interviews, remove all of historical advisor Hidayat's interview, remove all of journalist Nigel Hawkes's interview, remove sections of MI6 author Stephen Dorrell's interview, and remove sections of researcher Alison Rupper's own interview. We refused. Shortly after that, we learned that ITV refused to license the renewal of 14 minutes of essential archive, and so we were forced to pull the film from distribution on the 14th of September 2020. A month later, we received this email from Brian Lapping, essentially saying, "You leave us with no option but to take further measures which will include legal action. And you will be aware of the implications of this for your reputation." On November 1st, 2020, this article appeared in The Observer. The makers of 1985 series End of Empire have blocked the release of lauded documentary Coup 53, claiming it damages their reputation. This was in the middle of 3 months of legal wrangling. Fortunately, we had the best legal minds on our side, working almost pro bono. And in the week before Christmas, we received the best Christmas present. End of Empire's threatened lawsuit was deemed without merit, and immediately ITV granted us access to the 14 minutes of archive. And on December 14th, 2020, Coup 53 went back online distribution. But we had lost 3 months of distribution because of the threat of this frivolous lawsuit. So, setting these legal issues aside, Brian Lapping, Norma Percy, and Alison Rupert maintain that no film of Darbyshire was ever shot, but they admit that 4 tapes of him were recorded and accurately transcribed. Darbyshire was recorded admitting British involvement in the coup, claiming to have run the coup for our side, admitting his involvement in the kidnapping, torture, and murder of an Iranian general, claiming to have signed the checks to pay for the coup, admitting BBC involvement in the coup, and speaking disrespectfully of the head of MI6 at the time. If you are an MI6 agent speaking off the record and only for deep background, you would not allow a recording to be made. If a recording is made of you, you are by definition on the record. The existence of such a recording makes deniability impossible. Presidents have been deposed on the basis of similar recordings. So I'd like to pose 3 questions among many. Why did Darbyshire agree to be recorded if he was speaking off the record, as End of Empire claim? Why did Norman's friend, CIA agent Stephen Meade, agree to be filmed on the record? And why were clips of Stephen Meade speaking openly about Darbyshire selected for End of Empire if Darbyshire was off the record? The interview that you see in Coup 53 is the only interview that Stephen Meade ever gave in his career as a CIA agent, never before or never since. And although it was filmed on the record for End of Empire, it did not appear in the program. As you know from watching the film, Norman Darbyshire and Stephen Meade are on a first-name basis, and Norman Darbyshire shares intimate recollections about Stephen Meade's love life, which might have involved the Shah's sister. If End of Empire approached Stephen Meade to give an interview about this activity, one of the first things he would have done would be to call his friend Norman and ask, "Norman, they want me to speak about the Ashraf mission. Have you gone on record about this?" And if Norman had said, "No, I just talked to them off the record for deep background," Stephen Meade would not have agreed to go on camera. So the existence of this interview with Stephen Meade raises the question of the corresponding interview with Norman Darbyshire. And then, why were clips of Stephen Meade speaking openly about Darbyshire selected for End of Empire if Darbyshire was off the record? And here I'd like to play this clip, which is an outtake from Coup 53, but it explains the investigation of the telltale splices in the original camera roll of Stephen Meade's interview. The great thing about analog, which is what we're looking at here, is that there is a record of what has been used and what has not been used. And when we work digitally, there is no trace of where we might have cut something. In the old days, a piece of film, you actually had to cut that piece out and use it, and if you later decided not to use it, you then put it back in the master roll from which it came. But there is a trace, fingerprints, that say this shot was in the film at one time. There you can see the tape. That line across the bottom of the frame is a piece of Scotch tape. So what I've done here is identified the clips that were used in End of Empire at one point. This clip was used, this clip was used, this clip was used, this and this. And here is Alison, 35 years ago, asking Stephen Meade about Norman Darbyshire.
What kind of a man was Norman Darbyshire?
Cut.
Norman Darbyshire was a very competent individual. He had a lot of experience. He spoke Farsi fluently, French, and what other languages I don't know. But he was a very capable operator.
And cut. The rules of the game are that if somebody talks about somebody, you have to have reference to that person. So we have this very long transcript of an interview with Norman Darbyshire, which has been cut up. And here we have a roll of work print of Stephen Meade talking about Darbyshire, which has been similarly cut up. So that begs the question, what happened to Norman Darbyshire?
I must say, there really does appear to be no answer. You know, when I looked at this clip, and actually there's a longer version of the stuff from Granada, and then looked at your response, that's a material argument that doesn't seem to have a response. That is, if they were at some point in the film using the clip of Stephen Meade talking about Derbyshire, how is it that Derbyshire was never filmed and was never going to be in the film?
Exactly.